I'm going to start this video off with the acknowledgement that this is going to get virtually 0 views. And there's a non-zero chance that if people are watching this, that I might actually lose a fair few subscribers. I like to think that I've otherwise cultivated an audience that is generally pretty open-minded and otherwise progressive. A lot of the people I associate with here are. But I am also keenly aware that I operate within the gamer sphere, and it ain't exactly the most accepting place. Terminally online gamers that participate frequently in more niche circles tend to have some, interesting takes about things, like really interesting takes. So let me just say that there really isn't anything here for those of y'all interested in my more standard content. Come back in the next 6 months when I can muster enough energy between college coursework and, actual work to talk about, media again. But before you go, maybe type something like lol gay or okay fag in the comments below this. This way the algorithm knows that I'm still alive, so, please use your homophobia for good. So, jokes aside, outside of my occasional jabs at some of the more incel-esque behavior I tend to see online, I do opt to be as genuine and as understanding as I possibly can. This isn't going to be just me, lambasting heterosexual folks. I think most of them, like any group, want to do good by their fellow man. I just think that because they come from a privileged status. Yes, I know you hate the term privileged, but just bear with me here. There's maybe a bit of a blind spot in their understanding of folks from different backgrounds, and the importance of being out as you are and making yourself known. So if you have some legitimate questions or arguments, I am more than willing to respond in the comments below. However, I will not tolerate straight-up bigotry or clearly bad faith malarkey. Anyone who equates being queer to being a predator is going to get sent to the beyond. Be open-minded, not a Weasley nihilistic prick who thinks nothing really matters. But for the 10 of you that remained and just want to hear me verbally bumble on about stuff, hello, howdy, hi. And if you don't already know, I'm Devin. I'm a 25-year-old queer person who does the video thing in my off time. I guess I'd be kind of classified as a video essayist, but I don't think any of my videos are all that cohesive or come to much of a point. I'm more of a video rambler. I talk about whatever dumb stuff comes into my head for 30 minutes or less, and you kind of just deal with the aftermath. I have no doubts that this video will be similar in that regard. Anyways, it's no secret that I like dudes or that I'm non-binary. I basically state as much in my channel's About section. But outside of a few nods here and there in my videos, it's not a subject that I bring up all that much. I think this is largely because most of the topics I discuss rarely call for it, but being queer in online spaces, particularly online spaces that deal with media, has always been a topic I wanted to discuss or just, bring up because it really is kind of an odd space to occupy. Unlike a lot of online community spaces that engage with media, like film or literature, online video game communities have been kind of lagging behind in inclusivity. This is not just me talking about representation in games. We are thankfully seeing a lot more of that these days, which is, great. More so, I'm talking about how gaming communities often treat more marginalized people who engage with such spaces or appear in such works. I can't speak on behalf of women or racial minorities because I'm not a woman and I'm white. I can also pass as cis and as a straight person pretty easily, so comparatively I don't face nearly as many struggles as some people do. I should also note that this video is coming from an American perspective because, that's where I'm from, and the things that happen here affect me and folks like me more directly. I am not as familiar with queer movements outside of North America, but I'm trying to make a concerted effort to learn more about that. Sorry. But with that being said, I can speak about my own experience. So, I am. Now, one misconception I want to get out of the way right now is that queerness isn't just solely about who you don't have sex with, or what your gender identity is. I think a lot of straight folks, dudes in particular, kind of get hung up on the sex thing, but queerness also informs a lot of other things beyond that, from how people speak and act to how we understand our place in the society around us. You could be the most straight-passing gay dude in the world, but how you engage with the world is still different than how a straight person would. There are different challenges and obstacles that you have to face and consider that cisgendered, which means not trans, heterosexual folk don't. I think a non-insubstantial amount of people outside of the queer community see the legalization of same-sex marriage as the end of queer discrimination in the West, and there's nothing to be angry about, and really, we should all just chill, bro, but, that's not really the case. And I don't think the answer is to just be silent and assimilate either. The notion that just keeping your head down will make anything better is fairly silly. No movement has ever made tangible progress by sheepishly cowering and stifling themselves at any sign of confrontation. Best way to normalize something isn't by lingering in the shadows. Of course, that's way easier said than done, seeing as so much as holding your partner's hand is enough to garner you a few side-eyed stares, and at the best of times, and physical violence at the worst. And that's here in California. In fact, we're not all that far removed from when California voted yes on Prop 8 and banned same-sex marriage. Like, I remember people talking about that when I was in elementary school. But in a lot of ways, I'm really lucky to have been born here and now. Los Angeles was particularly homophobic not too long ago, but has become a lot more safe in more recent history. In some places in the US, like Florida, queer youth is directly under attack by their state legislature. And while there are a handful of countries in Europe that are a fair bit more tolerant than here, most of the world doesn't look at us all too kindly. Thus, a lot of queers take to the internet. Now, being a queer person on the internet is a fair bit easier, but it doesn't mean folks can't be nasty on it. Being a piece of shit IRL requires you putting yourself out there, which runs the risk of you getting your own ass kicked or being dragged into the public spotlight. As weird as it might sound, it actually requires at least a bit of backbone to be a homophobic Karen or whatever the male equivalent is. The internet is a place where folks can be virtually anonymous, which is a good thing, but it can also embolden pretty vile behavior because very rarely does anyone have to face the consequences of their own actions. Basically, the net is a place where you can fuck around and almost never have to find out. People are abstracted on the web. Their thoughts and ideas and emotions are broken down to, text and maybe a few pictures. We forget that behind all of that are actual people with their own thoughts, dreams, and lives. But of course, it isn't all bad. The internet is a tool after all. It can be used for good just as much as it can be used to be a dick. The same anonymity that allows assholes to be assholes can also be a safe place for queer folks to communicate with one another with some degree of safety, and also a place to amplify our voices. I think it's fantastic that I'm seeing more folks be open about who they are. As a young queer kid growing up in the 2000s and early 2010s, it was particularly hard finding folks like me. It's something that was more alienating than folks might realize. It made me feel like that I was some sort of outsider, always staring in at a world that would never really know me or want to know me. Hell, when I was a kid, gay was just a sort of derogatory word that folks would throw around just for anything they didn't particularly care for. Of course, the world is filled with folks like me, and we have just as much of a right to exist as ourselves as anyone else, regardless of what others say. And this ties in with that common sentiment I see typically amongst white cis-het folks when they see representation of racial or sexual minorities. It's this annoyed and often vexed rhetorical question that goes something along the lines of, why are there so many X and Y now? Now I know where this comes from. White heterosexual folks have almost always seen themselves in the spotlight of just about everything, and they really take that for granted. As recently as the 1960s, not all that long ago in the grand scheme of things, it was shocking for a black man to be the leading man in a film. Hell, an interracial kiss in Star Trek was blacked out in certain broadcasts in the South. And that sounds crazy, right? Well, these days in DeSantis land, books and media related to queer culture are being banned and yoinked out of school libraries. If you're a high school kid in Florida, it might soon be illegal for you to watch live performances of something as tame as the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Straight folks see themselves in everything, and believe that's just the way things should be. They will never know what it's like to reside in the periphery, but the little representation you do get is just being a side character or as a villain. You might think you are above media affecting your mindset or view of the world, but if you think you are, you're either ignorant of its power because you see yourself and your ideals reflected in it to the point of ubiquity, or you're an outright liar. Conservative politicians are well aware of the power of media and representation. That's why they try to shut it down, because it terrifies them. The mere act of being seen is a threat to their status. But in a society that holds the belief that all men are created equal, is it not a vile rejection of those beliefs to assert that only a few should live under the sun? We are your brothers, your sisters, cousins, and friends. We are your neighbors, grocery clerks, office techs, and repairmen, all living lives equally as rich and complex as your own, sharing space on a speck in an amazing and terrifying void. If you take anything from this video, remember that. I'm sure what I said in this video is nothing new, and has certainly been said better by a million other folks across the queer community before me. This is just me speaking aloud during a really odd and uncertain time. Maybe it's just me being an optimist, but I do think things will get better. But with the Republican blocking of Zoe Safir and overturning of Roe v. Wade, for progress to be gained and maintained, it has to be fought for. And the first step in that fight is to put yourself out there and make yourself known. See y'all again soon.